Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Independence watching the stars through the main window when the message came through the communication system. The voice was cold and came from the Galactic Council headquarters on the distant planet Nexus Prime. Jake had been expecting routine patrol, orders, or maybe news about supply shipments, but what he heard made his blood run cold. All human vessels must leave Council space within 72 hours, the message said. Humanity is no longer welcome in the Galactic Council. Any ship that stays will be destroyed. Jake looked at his crew members who were all staring at him with wide eyes. Lieutenant Amy Collins was the first to speak. Captain, did they just kick us out of the galaxy? Jake nodded slowly. He had served in space for 20 years and had never heard anything like this. The human race had been part of the Galactic Council for almost 300 years, since they first learned to travel between stars. They had followed all the rules and helped keep peace in their sector of space. The Independence was one of 50 human ships patrolling the outer rim where pirates and smugglers often caused trouble. Jake's job was simple: keep the trade routes safe and report anything unusual to Council headquarters. He had been doing this for 10 years without any major problems. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Parker received the same message in her office at the Global Defense Command. She was a tall woman with gray hair who had spent her whole life in the military. Lisa had fought in 3 different wars and had seen things that would give most people nightmares, but this message was different. This threatened everything humans had worked for. Lisa called an emergency meeting with all the top military leaders and diplomats on Earth. The meeting room was full of worried faces as she explained what had happened. The other 6 species have formed an alliance against us, she said. They claim we are too dangerous and unpredictable to remain in the Council. Dr. Nathan Cross was also in the meeting. He was a scientist who studied ancient alien ruins and artifacts. Nathan had been working on translating old texts found in ruins across many different worlds. These ruins belonged to a race called the Forerunners who had disappeared millions of years ago. I have been finding the same warning in many different Forerunner sites, Nathan told the group. It appears in dozens of different languages, but it always says the same thing. Never make the humans angry because they become something else when they are threatened. The other people in the room looked confused. Admiral Parker asked, "What does that mean exactly?" Nathan shook his head. "I am not sure yet, but the Forerunners seemed very afraid of humans even though we were still living in caves when they wrote these warnings." Meanwhile, Commander Ryan Bell was on his science ship Discovery when he got orders to return to Earth immediately. Ryan had been exploring a system near the neutral zone looking for new planets that could support human life. His ship was small but fast and carried a crew of only 12 people. As Ryan's ship headed back toward Earth, he saw something that made him stop and stare. Alien ships were moving into the areas where humans used to patrol. The Zeltharians with their crystal-like ships that sparkled in the starlight. The Vorthon Empire vessels that looked like they were grown rather than built. The Kree Collective ships that moved in perfect formation like a school of fish. "They are not wasting any time," said Lieutenant Kelly Watson, who was Ryan's second in command. "They are taking over our territory before we even finish leaving." Ryan watched the alien fleets move past his small ship. The aliens ignored the Discovery completely as if humans no longer mattered. This made Ryan angry, but he knew his ship was no match for the massive alien fleets. All across human space, the same thing was happening. Human families who had lived on colonies for generations were told to pack up and leave. Traders who had spent their lives moving goods between different worlds found their licenses canceled. Scientists working on important research projects were forced to abandon their work, but something strange was happening in the ancient Forerunner ruins that humans had been studying. Dr. Cross noticed that the energy readings from these sites were getting stronger. Computer systems that had been dead for millions of years were slowly coming back to life. On the planet Kepler-7, a human archaeological team led by Dr. Susan Blake was packing up their equipment when the ruins they had been excavating suddenly lit up with blue energy. Ancient symbols appeared on walls that had been blank for centuries. The team's computers began receiving data transmissions from systems they did not even know existed. "This has never happened before," Dr. Blake told her team. "It is like the ruins are waking up." Similar reports came from other Forerunner sites across human territory. Energy levels were rising, and ancient defense systems that had been dormant were showing signs of activity. The timing seemed too perfect to be a coincidence. Captain Morrison received new orders as his ship approached Earth. Instead of landing, He was told to join other human ships at a secret meeting point in the asteroid belt. When he arrived, Morrison found dozens of military vessels waiting in the shadows of the large space rocks. Admiral Parker's voice came over the communication system. "The other species think they can push us around because we are the youngest race in the galaxy," she said. "They believe we will just disappear quietly. They are wrong." Morrison looked out at the gathering fleet and felt something he had never experienced before. It was not fear or anger, but something deeper. It was like a sleeping part of his mind was waking up for the first time. The galaxy was about to learn that the Forerunner warnings were not ancient superstitions, but accurate predictions of what would happen when humanity faced extinction. 3 months had passed since the alien species forced humanity out of the Galactic Council, and the galaxy looked very different now. The Zeltharians had taken control of the mining worlds in the Kepler system, where humans had found rare metals. The Vorthan Empire claimed the farming planets in the Perseus Arm, where human colonists had grown food for dozens of worlds. The Kree Collective built military bases in the Centauri corridor, which was the main route between the inner and outer galaxy regions. The alien species were happy with their new territories and thought the human problem was solved forever. They divided up human colonies like pieces of a pie and erased most signs that humans had ever lived there. Some aliens even joked that humanity had been nothing more than a brief mistake in galactic history. But they had made one very big error in their thinking. On Earth, President Maria Santos stood before the Global Defense Council in a meeting that would be remembered for thousands of years. She was a small woman with dark hair and fierce eyes who had led her country through 2 wars before becoming leader of the entire planet. "The aliens believe we will disappear quietly into the darkness," Maria said to the room full of military leaders and scientists. "They think our 300 years in space makes us children playing with toys we do not understand. But they forgot something very important about humans." Maria walked to the big screen that showed Earth from space. "They forgot that we did not just survive on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to love the challenge. We turned our biggest weakness into our greatest strength. We never give up even when everything looks hopeless." Director Kevin Hayes of the Human Defense Initiative was in the audience listening to every word. Kevin was a tall man with scars on his face from a battle with space pirates years ago. He had been working on secret projects that most people did not know existed. After the meeting, Kevin activated something called Project Phoenix. This was a plan that combined human creativity with technology taken from Forerunner ruins. Factories across the solar system began working day and night to build ships and weapons that had never been seen before. These were not copies of alien technology, but something completely new. Captain Susan Blake was leading a secret mission deep in space aboard a ship called Shadowrunner. Susan had been the archaeologist who first saw the Forerunner ruins wake up, and now she was using that experience to help the military. Her job was to sneak into areas controlled by aliens and watch what they were doing. Susan's ship was painted black and used special technology that made it almost invisible to alien sensors. She and her small crew could get very close to alien bases without being detected. What they found made Susan very angry. The aliens were not just taking human territory. They were destroying everything humans had built. Entire cities were being torn down and the materials recycled. Schools where human children had learned were bulldozed flat. Hospitals where human doctors had saved lives were converted into alien research facilities. "They are trying to erase us from history," Susan told her crew. "They want to pretend humans never existed at all." On a hidden research station called Omega, Dr. Angela Torres was making discoveries that would change everything. Angela was a young scientist who specialized in studying alien biology and ancient technology. She had been translating more Forerunner texts and found something incredible. The Forerunner warnings about humans were not about human aggression or violence. They were about human evolution. The ancient texts described a species that could change not just their tools and society, but their actual bodies and minds when facing extinction. The Forerunners had met humans millions of years ago when early humans were still learning to use fire. The Forerunners were not afraid of human weapons, Angela explained to her research team. They were afraid of human potential. They saw what we could become if we were pushed to the edge of survival. Angela's discovery explained why the Forerunner ruins had activated when humans were expelled from the galaxy. The ancient machines were designed to help humans when they faced their darkest hour. Meanwhile, strange reports were coming from the territories that aliens had taken from humans. Kree collective bases would suddenly go silent with no explanation. Vorthan Empire ships would disappear between star systems without sending any distress signals. Seltarian mining operations would be found completely empty with no signs of what happened to the workers. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Wright was the first person to document what humans started calling phase shift incidents. Danny was a career soldier who had fought in many battles, but what he was seeing now was completely different from normal warfare. Human soldiers and civilians who had been trapped behind enemy lines were developing abilities that seemed impossible. They could move faster than normal humans and solve complex problems under extreme stress. Groups of humans separated by vast distances could coordinate their actions without any communication equipment. "It is like they are becoming something more than human," Danny reported to his commanders. "But they are still completely human at the same time. I do not know how to explain it." The alien species began to notice that something was wrong in their newly conquered territories. Patrols would go out and never return. Supply convoys would vanish without a trace. Even their most secure facilities were being infiltrated by an enemy they could not see or detect. The Drakmor clans were the first to admit they had a serious problem. These aliens were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds through superior military tactics. They prided themselves on never retreating from any battle. But now their greatest generals were reporting losses they could not explain or prevent. "We are not fighting humans anymore," one Drakmor commander reported. "We are fighting ghosts that can strike anywhere and disappear before we can respond. Our sensors cannot track them and our weapons cannot hit them." The Ashanti Federation, who were usually peaceful traders, called for emergency meetings to discuss what they called the human crisis. The Nexari, who were beings made of pure energy, reported that humans had somehow learned to fight opponents who could turn into energy and phase through solid matter. Back on Earth, Admiral Parker was coordinating what looked like a retreat, but was actually something much more clever. Human ships were not just running away from alien forces. They were repositioning themselves for a type of warfare that no alien species had ever encountered. The galaxy was slowly beginning to realize that expelling humanity had not solved their problem. It had created a much bigger one. The Forerunner warnings were starting to come true, and by the time the aliens understood what was happening, it would be too late to stop it. Humanity was awakening to its true potential, and the galaxy was not ready for what came next. 6 months after humanity was kicked out of the Galactic Council, the alien species faced a crisis unlike anything they had ever experienced. The Kree Collective had lost 17 military bases in the Centauri corridor, and their hive mind network could not explain how it happened. The Vorthan Empire watched their bioengineered super soldiers get eliminated one by an enemy they could never see coming. The Zeltharians discovered that their most secure fortress on Kepler Prime had been completely taken over, and all their computer systems were corrupted beyond repair. The aliens were learning a hard lesson about humanity that they should have learned from the Forerunner warnings. When humans were backed into a corner with no escape, they did not fight like any other species in the galaxy. They became something entirely different. Admiral Greg Foster sent a message to the Galactic Council from somewhere deep in space where alien sensors could not find him. Greg was an older man with white hair and calm blue eyes who had spent 40 years in the military. His words were quiet, but every alien leader who heard them felt a chill run down their spine. "You expelled us from your civilization because you said we were unpredictable and dangerous," Greg said into the camera. "You were correct about one thing. You never understood what humans can do when you threaten our survival. Now you are about to learn." The human way of fighting was completely different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Most wars involved large fleets meeting in space battles or armies fighting for control of planets. Diplomats would negotiate truces and treaties would be signed when one side gained advantage over the other. Humans had thrown out all the old rules of warfare. They fought like shadows that could strike anywhere and vanish before counterattacks could begin. They did not try to hold territory or capture resources. Instead, they focused on making their enemies afraid to sleep at night. Captain Alex Morgan led a team called Strike 7 that consisted of only 12 humans, but they had successfully destroyed 3 major Kree hive nodes. These nodes were the communication centers that allowed the Kree Collective to coordinate their actions across entire star systems. Without them, thousands of Kree ships and soldiers became confused and unable to work together effectively. Alex and his team did not use massive weapons or huge armies. They used psychology and fear as much as bullets and explosives. They would hit enemy bases just hard enough to cause damage but not hard enough to completely destroy them. This meant the survivors would spread stories about the invisible human attackers to other bases. "We do not need to kill every enemy soldier," Alex explained to his team. "We just need to make them so scared of us that they make mistakes." Fear is a weapon that never runs out of ammunition. The Ashanti Federation, who were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and diplomats, called emergency meetings to discuss what they now called the human problem. Their ships carried goods between different star systems and had always been safe from attack because everyone respected their neutrality. But humans did not attack Ashanti ships. Instead, they would appear nearby just long enough to be detected and then disappear again. This made the Ashanti crews nervous because they never knew if the next human ship they encountered would be friendly or hostile. Ambassador Zethrak of the Zeltharians presented evidence to the Council that humans had gained access to Forerunner technology that was more advanced than anything the current galactic species possessed. The Zeltharians had been studying technology for over 10,000 years, but human devices seemed to work using principles they could not understand. Their weapons respond to human thoughts, Zethrak reported. Their ships bond with human pilots in ways that make them extensions of the pilot's body. Their defensive systems treat humans as authorized users while seeing all other species as intruders. Dr. Claire Watson was working from a secret research facility hidden in Earth's asteroid belt where she had successfully decoded several Forerunner encryption systems. Claire was a young woman with red hair who was considered one of the smartest people in human history. What she discovered changed everything humans thought they knew about their own origins. The Forerunners had not just left warnings about humans. They had left tools and weapons specifically designed to work only for humans. These devices had been waiting in ruins across the galaxy for millions of years until humans developed enough to use them properly. "The Forerunners were not afraid of us," Claire told her research team. "They were preparing us for something. All these weapons and tools were meant to activate when humans faced extinction. We were supposed to find them." The most disturbing reports came from encounters with the Nexari. These beings were made of pure energy and could phase through solid matter like ghosts. For thousands of years, no physical weapon had been able to harm them. The Nexari had been untouchable in every war they had ever fought. But humans had somehow learned to detect energy beings and fight them using technology that should not have been able to affect incorporeal opponents. Nexari scouts who had been sent to spy on human activities were being systematically hunted and destroyed by human soldiers using weapons that could hit targets that existed only as Energy Commander Rachel Price was documenting the evolution of human combat tactics from her position aboard the carrier New Horizon. Rachel was a career military officer who had studied alien warfare for 20 years, but what she was seeing now defied everything she thought she knew about combat. Human teams are developing new fighting methods in real time, Rachel reported to Earth Command. They adapt to each alien species within days of first contact. They find weaknesses that the aliens do not even know they have and exploit them with surgical precision. The Drakmor clans had always been the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Their culture was built around honor in battle, and they had never retreated from any fight in their recorded history. Drakmor soldiers were trained from childhood to show no fear and to die fighting rather than surrender. But now Drakmor fleets were withdrawing from human space after losing entire battle groups to what their commanders could only describe as shadow predators that hunted like wolves but struck like lightning. The proud warrior culture that had dominated dozens of worlds was running away from a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers just months earlier. The aliens began to realize they had made a terrible mistake by forcing humanity out of the galactic community. They had expected humans to either disappear quietly or mount some kind of conventional military response that could be defeated through superior numbers and technology. Instead, humanity had evolved into something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were not just fighting a war for territory or resources. They were fighting to prove something to the universe itself about what happens when you threaten a species that refuses to accept extinction. The Forerunner warnings were coming true, and the galaxy was beginning to understand why an ancient race that had mastered the secrets of space and time had been afraid of the small mammals living on a blue world in an unremarkable star system. The hunt had begun and humanity was no longer the prey. 1 year after humanity was expelled from the Galactic Council, the alien species faced a reality they had never imagined possible. They were not just losing battles or territory. They were losing their fundamental understanding of how warfare worked. The humans had rewritten the rules of conflict in ways that made thousands of years of military experience completely useless. The Vorthon Empire's Grand Admiral, Sithvar, sent a desperate message to the Council that would be remembered as the moment the aliens realized they had awakened something beyond their ability to control. Sithvar had commanded fleets for over 300 years and had conquered dozens of worlds for the Empire. These humans do not fight like any species we have ever encountered, Sithvar reported in a voice that shook with something that might have been fear. They do not seem to care about casualty rates, territorial gains, or conventional victory conditions. They fight like they are trying to prove something to the universe itself about what they truly are. General Marcus Reed was coordinating human operations from his mobile command center aboard the massive carrier New Horizon. Marcus was a quiet man with gray eyes who had spent his entire adult life in the military. From his floating headquarters, he directed strikes across 17 different star systems simultaneously using tactics that no alien strategist could predict or counter. Human forces had evolved beyond traditional military structures during their year of isolation. They now operated in small independent units that could survive on their own for months, while maintaining perfect coordination when larger operations required it. Each team was like a single finger on a giant hand that could strike with devastating precision. The breakthrough that changed everything came from Dr. Peter Collins, a scientist who specialized in alien biology. Peter had been studying captured enemy soldiers to understand how different species thought and fought. What he discovered sent shockwaves through the human command structure. "We are not just adapting our tactics," Peter reported to the general staff. "We are adapting at a genetic level. Exposure to Forerunner technology is activating dormant DNA sequences that have been sleeping in human genes for millions of years. We are literally evolving into something new." The evidence was undeniable. Human soldiers who had been fighting behind enemy lines for months were showing enhanced reflexes that bordered on superhuman. Their ability to process information under stress had increased dramatically. Most importantly, they were developing what could only be described as a collective unconscious that allowed them to coordinate actions across vast distances without any communication equipment. The Kree Collective's hive mind network had been their greatest advantage for over 50,000 years. No enemy had ever been able to penetrate their shared consciousness or disrupt their perfect coordination. The Kree thought of individual minds as primitive and inefficient compared to their collective intelligence. But humans were not just breaking into the Kree network. They were inserting thoughts and commands that the collective consciousness could not distinguish from its own internal communications. The psychological warfare was so effective that entire Kree fleets began attacking each other. Convinced that neighboring ships had been compromised by human infiltrators, Captain Nicole Davis led the mission that finally made the galaxy understand what they were truly facing. Nicole was a special operations officer who had volunteered for what everyone assumed would be a suicide mission. Her target was the Nexari homeworld, a planet that existed partially in normal space and partially in an energy dimension that only the Nexari could access. The Nexari had evolved beyond physical form over 50,000 years ago and existed as beings of pure energy. Their homeworld was defended by energy barriers that could stop any physical attack, and their cities were built from crystallized energy that no material weapon could damage. Nicole and her team not only infiltrated the planet but completed an impossible task. They extracted energy samples from the planet's core and somehow converted them into solid matter that human scientists could study. The Nexari watched in horror as humans demonstrated the ability to manipulate the fundamental forces that defined their existence. "They have taken our essence and made it into something they can hold in their hands," the Nexari High Council reported to the Galactic Council. "This should be impossible according to every law of physics we understand." The Ashanti Federation made another attempt at peace negotiations but discovered that humanity was no longer interested in returning to the old system. The Ashanti had always been successful diplomats because they understood what different species wanted and could find compromises that satisfied everyone, but Humans no longer wanted compromise or negotiation. Ambassador Jennifer Stone delivered humanity's response to the Ashanti peace envoys in words that would echo through galactic history. Jennifer was a tall woman with blonde hair who had been a successful diplomat before the expulsion. Now she spoke with the authority of a species that had transcended its former limitations. "You wanted us gone because you feared our unpredictability," Jennifer told the alien diplomats. "You believed we were too dangerous and chaotic to exist alongside your ordered civilizations. Now you will learn what we are truly capable of when you corner a species that refuses to die quietly." The Zeltharians had always relied on mathematical models to predict the behavior of other species. Their crystal-based computers could process vast amounts of data and calculate the probability of different outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. These calculations had guided Zeltharian policy for thousands of years, but human behavior was breaking their mathematical models. The equations that described human actions began to resemble abstract art more than logical calculations. Variables appeared in their computers that should not have existed, and outcomes occurred that had zero probability. According to Zeltharian mathematics, they are operating outside the laws of probability, the Zeltharian Science Council reported. "Our computers are generating results that describe human actions using mathematics we do not recognize. It is as if they exist in a different reality from the rest of us." The Drakmor clans had always been proud of their warrior culture, but now their poets were composing epics about humans that sounded more like descriptions of natural disasters than military opponents. Drakmor warriors spoke of battles where humans seemed to merge with darkness itself, striking with the fury of dying stars and vanishing with the patience of entropy. "They do not fight us," one Drakmor veteran reported. "They hunt us. We are no longer warriors facing other warriors. We are prey being stalked by predators who have evolved beyond our ability to comprehend." As the second year of conflict began, the alien species opened their oldest archives and sent scholars to search for any information about the mysterious Forerunners and their warnings about humanity. What they found in the deepest vaults of their libraries would change their understanding of everything they thought they knew about the galaxy and their place in it. The truth about humanity was more terrifying than any of them had imagined. The final truth about humanity came from the deepest archives of the Galactic Council, records so old that most species had forgotten they existed. Dr. Helen Grant, Earth's leading expert on ancient alien civilizations, worked alongside captured alien scholars to translate documents that predated the formation of the current galactic government by millions of years. Helen was a small woman with silver hair who had devoted her entire life to understanding the mysterious Forerunners. What she discovered in those ancient files would change how every species in the galaxy understood their place in the universe. The Forerunners had not been warning other species about human aggression or violence. They had been warning about human potential. The ancient records revealed that millions of years ago, when human ancestors were still primitive mammals learning to use simple tools, the Forerunners had conducted experiments across the galaxy to create intelligent life. The Forerunners tested thousands of different species, Helen explained to a joint human-alien research committee. They guided some civilizations, provided technology to others, and eventually abandoned most when they failed to meet certain criteria. But humans were different from every other species they encountered. The Forerunner records described their growing amazement and eventual fear as they observed early human development. Unlike other species that evolved along predictable paths, humans showed an unprecedented ability to adapt, survive, and transcend their limitations when faced with extinction-level threats. Admiral Tony Garcia led the linguistics team that finally translated the complete Forerunner archives. Tony was a career military officer who had studied alien languages for 30 years, but the Forerunner texts were unlike anything he had ever encountered. The ancient writing seemed to change meaning depending on who was reading it and what they already understood. "The final Forerunner logs are terrifying," Tony reported to Earth Command. "They describe humans not as a primitive species, but as something that could surpass even Forerunner civilization if given enough time and pressure. The last entry says they withdrew from human space because they feared what we might become." One particular Forerunner record would be quoted by historians for centuries afterward. "They do not merely evolve," the ancient text read. "They transform. When pressed to the edge of survival, They become something beyond our ability to predict or control. We have given them tools they should not possess for another million years, yet they master them as if born to the purpose. We must withdraw before they surpass even us. The alien species had unknowingly triggered humanity's greatest evolutionary leap by threatening their existence. The technology humans had developed during their year of isolation was not just advanced. It was fundamentally different, based on principles that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Through sheer force of will and determination, Captain Steve Baker now commanded a fleet of human ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Steve had been a simple cargo pilot before the expulsion, but exposure to Forerunner technology had changed him like it had changed all humans. His ships could appear anywhere in the galaxy without using traditional faster-than-light travel methods. Steve delivered humanity's final ultimatum to the Galactic Council from the bridge of his flagship. The message was broadcast simultaneously to every world in Council space using technology that bypassed all alien communication networks. The terms are simple, Steve announced to the galaxy. Formal recognition of human sovereignty over all territories we have claimed or discovered. Full reparations for our forced expulsion from galactic society. A new treaty that acknowledges humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. Steve paused to let his words sink in before continuing. The alternative is the complete dismantling of the current galactic order. We will not return to our previous status as junior members of your civilization. That version of humanity no longer exists. President Karen Lewis addressed both Earth and the galaxy in a speech that would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its transformation to the universe. Karen was a young woman who had been elected just months before the expulsion began. She had led humanity through its darkest hour and emerged as the voice of a new kind of human civilization. You sought to diminish us by forcing us into isolation, Karen said from the steps of the global government building. Instead, you freed us from the constraints of your expectations and limitations. We are no longer the species that joined your council 3 centuries ago, seeking acceptance and guidance. Karen looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting her words across the galaxy. We have become what the Forerunners feared. Not destroyers, but transcenders. We offer you one choice: evolve alongside us or be left behind as relics of an older, simpler universe. The response from the Galactic Council was swift and unanimous. Complete and unconditional surrender. Formal apology for the expulsion. Immediate reparations paid in technology, resources, and territory. The old council was dissolved and replaced with a new galactic federation where humanity served as the primary guardians of peace and arbiters of disputes between other species. The Zeltharians were the first to formally acknowledge humanity's new status. We calculate that resistance to human supremacy has 0 probability of success, their mathematical models concluded. Integration with human civilization offers the highest probability of continued Zeltharian survival and prosperity. The Vorthan Empire followed quickly, offering to share their biological technology in exchange for human protection and guidance. The Kree Collective requested permission to study human consciousness to understand how individual minds could achieve coordination superior to their hive mind network. The Ashanti Federation became humanity's most enthusiastic supporters, recognizing the economic opportunities that would come from serving as intermediaries between humans and other species. The Nexari sought human assistance in understanding the energy-matter conversion techniques that human soldiers had demonstrated on their homeworld. Even the proud Drakmor clans submitted to human authority, requesting the honor of serving as humanity's warriors and protectors throughout the galaxy. In the years that followed, galactic civilization flourished under human guidance in ways that had never been possible under the old council system. Trade expanded beyond previous boundaries as human-designed ships could reach regions of space that had been inaccessible for millions of years. Conflicts that had simmered between species for millennia were resolved through human mediation and understanding. The Forerunner ruins across the galaxy became pilgrimage sites where beings from all species came to study the ancient warnings about humanity. But these warnings were no longer seen as prophecies of doom. They had become testaments to the power of evolution, adaptation, and the refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. The galaxy's first law had been remembered, but it was no longer a warning to be feared. It had become a promise that inspired every species to reach beyond their limitations and discover what they could become when they refused to accept defeat. Humanity had not forgotten who they were. They had discovered who they had always been meant to become, and the galaxy was infinitely better for it.